Mount Everest isn't just the roof of the world, it's a silent graveyard where ambition, adrenaline, and danger collide. Every season, climbers from around the globe push their bodies to the limit for a chance to touch the summit, but many never come back down. Their bodies remain scattered across the mountain, frozen where they fell, unchanged by time and watched by those who dare to follow. And while every Everest death is tragic, some are so strange, unsettling, or downright shocking that they still haunt climbers decades later. In this video, we're uncovering 5 of the most disturbing and unforgettable deaths on Mount Everest stories that will chill you long after they're over.
The year was 1933, and Maurice Wilson was a man with a mission. Believing that he had a duty to impart to humanity his message of physical healing through spiritual meditation and fasting,
Maurice Wilson's story doesn't begin like a typical Everest tragedy. It unravels like a mix of blind faith, wartime trauma, and a reckless dream that spiraled into one of the strangest deaths the mountain has ever witnessed. Born into a comfortable life in Bradford, he should have inherited his family's wool business, but the First World War changed him forever. Wilson went to France at just 18, fought brutally on the front lines, won the Military Cross for standing alone against a German assault, and then came home broken, physically, mentally, and spiritually. He wandered the world for years afterward, chasing peace he could never hold on to, coughing through old wounds and sinking deeper into a loneliness that no money or travel could fix. Then, in 1932, everything shifted. After a mysterious ritual of prayer and extreme fasting, taught, he claimed, by an unnamed healer no one else ever met, Wilson felt reborn. The sickness vanished. His belief in God and the power of fasting became absolute. He became convinced he had been chosen for something bigger, something divine, and that mission in his mind was Mount Everest. Wilson didn't just want to climb Everest. He believed he would reach the summit to prove his spiritual method could cure the world. It didn't matter that he had never climbed a real mountain, or that he barely knew how to fly. He bought a tiny de Havilland Moth airplane, named it Everest, learned to fly with great difficulty, and began telling everyone he'd either stand on the summit or die trying. Even when he crashed the plane during practice, even when the British Air Ministry banned him from flying, even when friends begged him to stop, nothing shook his obsession. And somehow, through sheer stubbornness, he pulled off the impossible. He flew across continents, dodged authorities, lied his way past fuel bans, and landed in India with just enough fuel left to roll onto the strip. It was the first miracle of his doomed mission. When the government confiscated his plane, Wilson simply changed tactics. He slipped into Darjeeling, met 3 Sherpas willing to help him, disguised himself as a mute monk, and illegally entered Tibet on foot. By April 1934, he stood at the base of Everest, alone, completely untrained, carrying barely any equipment, and yet absolutely certain that God and fasting would lead him to the top. What unfolded from that moment reads like a mixture of courage, delusion, and heartbreaking naivety. Wilson stumbled across the Rongbuk Glacier with no glacier training, constantly losing his way. He found a pair of crampons and threw them aside. He believed footprints cut the year before would still be there. He believed the mountain would simply open the path for him. Each attempt pushed him closer to physical collapse. Snowblind, starving, limping from old wounds, he kept forcing himself higher. The Sherpas begged him to turn back. He refused. In one of his last diary entries he wrote, "This will be a last effort, and I feel successful." That was the kind of unshakable conviction that made his journey inspiring and fatal. On May 31st, 1934, he made his final entry. Off again, gorgeous day. No one knows what happened after that. The Sherpas left when he didn't return. A year later, in 1935, an expedition found his body at the foot of the North Col, lying beside the shredded remains of his tent. He had alone, likely from exhaustion or starvation, just yards from where help could have been.
Near the summit of Mount Everest, up in the death zone, on the edge of the north face, there's a cave the climbers call Old Green Boot.
David Sharp's story is one of the most haunting tragedies ever to unfold on Mount Everest because of something far colder: silence. The kind of silence that comes when dozens of people walk past a dying man and keep climbing. Sharp wasn't a reckless amateur. He was strong, skilled, and fiercely independent. He had climbed Cho-Oyu, trekked across continents, and built a reputation for being calm, friendly, and incredibly resilient. He had a degree in mechanical engineering, a solid career, and plans to start teaching later that year. Everest wasn't meant to be his last mountain. It was supposed to be the accomplishment he carried into the next chapter of his life. But Sharp believed something many climbers quietly believe, that using oxygen, guides, and heavy support takes away from the purity of the climb. He wanted Everest on his own terms. No Sherpa partner, no hand-holding, no radio, and barely any oxygen. Just his skill, his willpower, and the mountain itself. That choice, combined with the brutal reality of Everest's north side, sealed his fate. He reached Advanced Base Camp with only the bare minimum provided by a basic services package: gear transport, food, a permit, and a tent. Everything above that point was up to him. He moved through the camps alone, set his own pace, and carried only 2 oxygen bottles, a fraction of what most climbers bring. On the night of May 13, 2006, David Sharp started his summit push. Climbers spotted him ascending through the darkness, moving slowly but determined. Whether he reached the summit or turned back just below it, no one knows. What is known is this: he began descending far too late, exhausted, frostbitten, and dangerously low on oxygen. By nightfall, he'd collapsed in a cramped rock alcove near 8,500 meters, Green Boots Cave, the most infamous landmark on Everest, where another climber's frozen body had already served as a silent marker for years. Sharp wedged himself beside that body and curled into a ball, arms wrapped around his legs, alone in temperatures that plunged far below freezing. He had no radio, no partner, no one waiting for him in a nearby tent, no one expecting him at a specific hour. He simply disappeared into the mountain's death zone. Through the early morning hours, climbers began passing him. Some saw him move slightly, some heard faint sounds. Others assumed he was already gone. At that altitude, where every breath burns and every step drains precious oxygen, stopping for too long can kill the rescuer. Most believed they couldn't save him. Some tried giving oxygen, shaking him, urging him to stand, but he was far beyond the point where willpower could bring him back. One climber later said he was still alive, but he wasn't there anymore. All day, climbers pushed past him, dozens on their way to the summit and dozens returning. It was one of the busiest summit days of 2006, and among all that movement, David Sharp slowly faded. When he didn't return to camp that night, people assumed he had simply bivouacked somewhere high, a dangerous but not unheard of choice among solo climbers. Hours later, word spread that someone had seen him sitting motionless in Green Boots Cave. By then, it was far too late. When David Sharp died, his body sat upright against the rock, beside Green Boots, frozen mid-embrace of his own legs, alone within sight of hundreds of climbers. Sharp's death wasn't just a tragedy, it was a mirror held up to the climbing world. A reminder that the death zone doesn't just strip oxygen, it strips judgment, warmth, humanity. And the mountain doesn't care who you are, an engineer, a teacher, a dreamer, or a seasoned climber. Up there, alone at 8,500 meters, everyone is fragile. Everyone is mortal.
On May 19, 2012, after 16 grueling hours of climbing, Shreya Shah Chlorfina, an inexperienced climber from Canada, finally reached the summit of Mount Everest.
Shreya Shah Chlorfine's story is one of the most haunting tragedies ever to unfold on Mount Everest. Not just because she died, but how she died, and how many people believe it never should have happened. Born in Kathmandu, raised in Mumbai, and eventually building a life in Toronto, Shreya grew up with Everest in her imagination. At 9 years old, she took a helicopter tour with her father, staring at the white giant from the sky, and something inside her clicked. Decades later, that childhood moment would become the dream she chased, no matter the cost. By 2012, she wasn't a professional climber, not even close. She worked as a fashion buyer, ran a small business, campaigned in local politics, and lived a comfortable suburban life with her husband Bruce. But Everest was the goal, her ultimate symbol of success. She poured everything into it. She fundraised, created a website, even took a second mortgage on her home. Nearly $100,000 went into this one attempt, driven by pure determination and a belief that passion alone could carry her to the top of the world. But Mount Everest doesn't care about dreams. It only respects experience. Shreya booked her climb with an inexperienced guiding company. Cheap, new, untested. Climbers later said she struggled on the mountain from the very beginning. Guides warned her she was slow, unfit for the pace, and burning oxygen too quickly. On summit day, they even told her not to go, but she insisted. This was her shot, the moment she had worked years for, mortgaged her home for, surrendered her life savings for. So she pushed forward into one of the deadliest seasons Everest had seen since 1996. That day, the route was jammed with climbers stuck in bottlenecks. Hours were lost standing still in the death zone, where your body is actively dying with every minute. Still, Shreya kept climbing, battling exhaustion, the cold, the thin air, and her own limits. Somehow, unbelievably, she reached the summit. She did it. Her dream had come true, but the mountain was about to demand its price. On the descent, her oxygen ran low. Her pace collapsed. Her strength disappeared. Other climbers described her moving like she was already half gone. Just 250 meters, an 820-foot stretch from Camp 4, Shreya fell. Her body was still clipped to the rope when climber Leanne Shuttleworth passed her the next day. Climbers had to step over her to survive their own descent. It took 10 days before her body could be recovered from above 8,000 meters, the zone where even rescue teams risk death with every breath. Shreya's death became a symbol of ambition pushed too far, of inexperienced climbers thrown into a commercialized Everest, and of a guiding company that should never have taken her that high. Some call her death tragic, others call it avoidable, but everyone agrees it is a brutal reminder. On Everest, one wrong decision can cost you everything, and Shreya paid with her life. Marco Siffredi's story reads like a legend and ends like a ghost story. He was born in Chamonix, practically raised in the shadow of mountains, in a family where climbing wasn't a hobby. It was destiny. His father was a mountain guide. His brother died in an avalanche. For Marco, danger was never a warning. It was an invitation. By his teens, he had already carved his name into the steep faces of the Alps with impossible snowboard descents. Peru, Bolivia, the Himalayas, everywhere he went, he chased the line no one else dared to ride. And Everest was his ultimate prize. In 2001, he reached the summit and snowboarded down the Norton Couloir, becoming the first person in history to ride Everest from the top. But to Marco, that wasn't enough. His dream, the one he called the Holy Grail, was the Hornbein Couloir, a death drop chute slicing down the north face, steeper, narrower, darker, and almost never holding enough snow to attempt. That year, the Hornbein was bare, so Marco promised himself he'd come back, and in 2002 he did. Late in the season, exhausted, underfed, and pushing his body beyond its limits, he returned to Everest. Even the Sherpas thought the timing was madness. Yet Marco believed the late-season storms might finally coat the Hornbein in enough snow for the descent that obsessed him. On September 8th, after a brutal 13-hour climb, he reached the summit again, but something was off. He wasn't celebrating. He wasn't smiling. He muttered, "Tired. Too much climbing." The weather was turning. Clouds were creeping in. The Sherpas begged him not to go. They warned him the conditions were wrong, the descent too late, the risk too high. But Marco had chased this dream too far to stop now. Around 3 p.m., he strapped on his snowboard and slid toward the mouth of the Hornbein Couloir into a wall of moving clouds. It was the last clear moment anyone ever had of him. The Sherpas watched him disappear into the gray. Sometimes they caught glimpses of a tiny figure far below, and then, somewhere near the North Pole, 300 meters beneath Camp 3, they saw something chilling, a distant silhouette, standing, pausing, before sliding silently out of sight. No sound, no tracks, no trace. By the time they reached the spot, the snow was smooth. Marco's tracks had vanished. His body was gone. Everest had taken him, swallowed him whole. To this day, no one knows what happened in those final minutes, whether it was a fall, an avalanche, or something else entirely. All that remains is the legend of the man who dared to ride the most dangerous line on Earth and never came back. Doug Hansen wasn't a famous climber or a record chaser. He was a quiet, hard-working postal worker from Washington, a man who ran marathons, climbed mountains on weekends, and carried a simple dream: to stand on the summit of Everest. It was the one goal he refused to let go of. He'd tried once before in 1995 and had been forced to turn back just a few hundred feet from the top. That unfinished business burned inside him for an entire year. So, in 1996, he came back. Friends said he looked tired even before the climb began. Some climbers at base camp noticed he had frostbite injuries from the previous year. He was recovering from a small throat surgery. He wasn't in perfect shape, but Everest has a cruel way of feeding hope. Doug faxed his kids often from base camp, telling them he was going to give it everything he had, and he meant it. On May 9th, just before midnight, he started his summit push with Rob Hall's Adventure Consultants team. Other climbers doubted he could keep up. At one point during the climb, someone overheard him say he was cold and wanted to go back, but he didn't. Whether from determination or a desperate need to finish what he started, Doug pushed on, step after agonizing step toward the top of the world. He climbed long past the turnaround time the moment every mountaineer knows is life or death. Most of the team had already abandoned their summit attempt and turned around, but Doug kept going. Witnesses later said he looked exhausted, barely lifting his feet, laces dragging behind him. Still, he pushed forward. Still, Rob Hall stayed with him. Hours later, Doug reached the summit at around 4:30 p.m., the last climber of the day to get there. The wind was rising. The sky was darkening, and the blizzard that would become one of Everest's deadliest storms in history was already building around them. On the descent, everything fell apart. Doug ran out of oxygen near the Hillary Step. Rob radioed base camp saying Doug was weak, unable to move without help, and that the situation was very serious. Other guides begged Hall to leave Doug and save himself. Hall refused. "We're both listening," he told base camp, his voice tired but steady. Somewhere in the chaos of the storm, Doug Hansen collapsed and never got back up. At dawn, Rob Hall made one final radio call. When asked where Doug was, he gave a haunting reply: "Doug is gone." And he never explained what happened next. Rob died later that day, still clipped to the mountain, still refusing to leave his client behind. Doug's body was never found. Years later, climbers pieced together fragments of what happened: late decisions, summit fever, human pressure, and a storm no one could have outrun. His death became one of the most debated parts of the 1996 Everest disaster. Was he a victim of bad judgment? Was he pushed too hard? Or was he simply a man who believed in his dream more than he feared the cost? What remains is the heartbreak. A father who wanted to inspire his kids by reaching the top of the world and lost his life chasing it.